G'day, Geoff Lewis here from Seriously Series, and welcome to another episode in Cocktails by the Campfire. Today we're in the deepest, darkest Yar Loop, and obviously due to current restrictions, we've gone for an urban fire. But once again, we're going to be chatting to an intrepid adventurer, but someone who's obviously taken a little bit more of a slight deviation from the current norm. Thanks for coming along today, Kim.
No worries, Geoff.
I understand you're part of a pretty interesting organisation known as Austravel. Is that right?
Yeah, Austravel Safety Net. I mean, it's right up the alley for what you're doing because we looked at Australia and only about 25% of Australia is covered by mobile phone coverage.
Is that right?
So some years back, about 8 years back, Roy Watkins was the founder of the organisation and he decided to start putting in HF radio bases that provided long-range radio coverage for people who travel in remote areas.
Right, okay.
So the bottom line is that anybody that travels outside mobile phone coverage probably should consider HF radio or at least some other alternate form of long-range communications.
Oh, okay. And I guess it doesn't take, you don't really have to travel that far here in Western Australia to be out of mobile coverage.
Well, Western Australia is pretty good from the point of view that there's a lot of mobile phone coverage along the bitumen, the main highways. But you don't have to deviate far off to find a nice camp and suddenly find your mobile phone doesn't work.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So, there's, when you look at the coverage maps, there's just not a lot of coverage Australia-wide. And all those remote areas, that 75-odd% that's not covered, they're the best places to go forward driving, Geoff.
Oh, I agree with you there, Kim. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. So, obviously for yourself, HF radio is something that's been a passion for quite some time.
Not just HF, I guess I'm retired or meant to be retired. And I started out as an apprentice in electronics and communications many years ago. Moved out of the government service into my own business with some partners and spent many years in electronics design and manufacture. And subsequently have spent about 45 years of my life involved with electronics and communications at some level. So being retired, I thought, well, what am I going to do? How do I keep the grey matter ticking over?
Yep.
So I just thought, well, the network that Roy had started, I thought, well, I'll get involved with that and we can start to add more to it, add more features to it. And it's probably become bigger than Ben-Hur at this stage.
It's certainly sounding like it. And one thing I did forget, we've obviously got some tasty drink here.
I know, I was a bit worried it was getting a bit warm by the fire.
I'll give you a cheers from there because of social distancing. And today, Kim and I are enjoying a lovely mojito because it is a slightly warmer day here than yesterday, so you have to do it in style. But there are a number of HF networks out there in Australia, but I guess how does Austravel sort of stand out from the rest? I know there's a number of key features you've told me about.
Well, we actually looked at that with the networks that were out there, and some have been around for quite a long time, but they haven't really developed technically in the time that they've been in service. And probably a bigger issue is they've never really adopted the features that were already available in everybody's radio.
Okay.
So part of making Austravel different was to look at how can we incorporate the features that are built into the radios and make it a bit more of a user-friendly device to those that go bush.
Okay. Because that is, I know from my experience talking to people, there's this misconception that HF radio is incredibly difficult to use. It's considered by some to be a little bit outdated, but obviously that's not the case in regards to Austravel.
Well, no, not wanting to get too technical, but the radios now have got a signalling system built into them, which allows to call radios like you'd call a mobile phone.
Right.
That signalling system also allows you to write messages on the radio.
Yep.
And send those messages back into the internet in our case.
Yep.
And be processed by a computer to be further fed through to the mobile phone network.
So a basic SMS, essentially.
Exactly. An SMS to a mobile phone is one of the things that we do in Austravel.
Okay.
In addition to that, the bases are all connected to the mobile phone network with a telephone line.
Right.
So you can make telephone calls through the radio. So you literally put the number into the radio, and with that signalling system that's built in, the radio sends the number and the request to make the phone call. The base hears the number, gets a phone line, dials the number, and you speak to a person on the telephone. So that can dial any mobile phone or landline in Australia.
Okay.
You've still got to treat it, it's a phone call. It still is using a two-way radio, but it's still a very functional means of communicating and passing information, as long as the person understands you are on a two-way radio.
Because there's that problem of them not knowing if they've got to hang up or you've got to hang up.
Well, that's not an issue. That's all taken care of automatically by the computers. It's more about you can't both talk at once.
Oh, yes.
Because it's only a one-way, radio's one direction at a time, and as long as they take their turn, and then there's no problems.
And I guess some people would then still argue that a satellite phone, for example, has those features, but HF goes that one step further, doesn't it?
Well, all right, we'll jump onto satellite phones. Why not? Look, you wouldn't go bush without something, is what it boils down to. The sat phone, they can be pretty expensive to buy. And what people do forget is that when they're out bush, they haven't got their mobile phone working anymore because they're out of range. So in general, they don't have the ability to look up directories of things. So you're at the back of Western Australia somewhere in the middle of the night, and you dip the front of the car into a creek a bit deep or something like that.
It happens.
And it's like, okay, you know you're stuck. Yeah, you got food and water, you're okay. You don't want to make a 000 call, which is your emergency number for a sat phone, but you want some help. So now it's a case of, well, who do I call? You ring your mum up in Victoria and sort of say, Mum, we're stuck. Can you see if you can find someone in Western Australia to give us a hand? So look back through Austravel, there is actually a facility for people with sat phones to use a service called HelpSat, where our normal emergency operators will help out sat phone people as well. But again, the downside is if we move towards, say, mechanical failure, the beauty of HF radio is if you're halfway up one of the tracks and you've broken an axle or something like that, you know you can fix it yourself. You've got plenty of food and water. By making that call and that management of getting parts to you on the HF radio, it's highly likely that, because it's a party line type conversation, that someone else will pipe up and say, look, we're at Kalgoorlie next week, we'll pick up the freight and we're coming up that track, we'll bring it up to you. Now again, on the sat phone you don't have that.
No.
Because it's point to point, one person only, versus the HF, which is party line. That's one aspect. The sat phone, of course, call costs and ongoing costs to be on a network are still quite high. Whereas with the HF, once you've joined Austravel, you've literally got talk as much as you like. Even the phone network is very generous. There's no costs for using the phone network. And of course, for me to talk to you in your vehicle when we're out bush, we can talk as much as we like over 500 kilometres if we need to.
It's quite impressive when you put it like that. And we have talked about this obviously off camera, but there is actually an app that you can use on your phone and actually get benefit out of that HF radio.
This bridges back to where you're saying about the concept of HF. People think it's a bit old-fashioned and that, and where we bridged it to the mobile phone network. Part of that was writing a mobile phone app, which allows friends and family to have an app on their phone, or grandkids for a lot of our members. And that app, from the radio, you can mark a position or send a GPS position into the internet, into the cloud, if you like. And then if a grandkid opens up that app on their phone, they can actually see your camp position. They can look at Google Maps and they can actually look at the terrain and everything around your camp as well. More importantly, they'll see that you've moved since yesterday. And if they want to, they can actually write a message on their phone that comes back to your HF radio as well. So that was part of trying to bridge the usefulness of HF radio, particularly the features. These features were already built into the radios for the last 20 years.
20 years?
We've been there for 20 years on most of the radios. So it was really a case of incorporating them and bridging them into the internet to make, and a phone app to literally make them more user-friendly for those at home and those in the bush.
Wow, that's incredible. It's amazing, obviously there's that misconception out there, but you've proven that, HF is still more than competitive in this day and age.
Well,
and I guess that sort of brings me on to my next question. Why do you think people would be willing to join Austravel Safety Network? Well, we've got these benefits there, but it's more than just a network, isn't it? It's a club and a community.
Well, exactly. I mean, the club's got in excess of 400 members at this point in time. Many of those are couples, so there's really over 600 people involved.
Wow.
And we do have quite a few social events here in Western Australia and in the eastern states. Those social events are a combination of meeting people, which everybody likes doing, and in general, we'll do a little bit of training as well. Now, training could be how to use your HF radio, could be how to use your GPS, but we find that most people are quite keen to learn something a bit new, or in particular learn a bit more about using something that they already own. So the social side of the club membership is very important. We're a not-for-profit organisation run by volunteers, so nobody gets paid. We've got some exceptional people within the organisation doing all the various different tasks, and that just allows membership fees to be kept pretty low, even though we've got real costs with ACMA and insurance and all those other things that...
And what is, I'll just cut in there, but what is sort of the annual membership fee that we're looking at?
At the moment, we're $100 a year flat fee.
Really?
That includes all of the SMS messaging, phone calls, everything you might make through your HF radio and your GPS marking. That's all physically included in the $100 fee. For those that have got an old radio, that's just going back to something you find in the Ark in general, but they're still very serviceable because all this equipment's made for the paramilitary type market, like the UN and people like that. The equipment's not, dare I say it, out of China and made to fail in 12 months' time. It's actually built to be very robust, solid equipment. So we've got 30-year-old radios that are still in our network.
That's impressive because, not to get back on the satellite phones, but technology nowadays just simply doesn't last. You're lucky if you get 2, 3, 5 years out of it.
Exactly. So what I was saying is, but to step back a bit further in time, the old radios don't have some of these features. So people who don't want to pay for the features and not be able to use them, they've got two options. They could buy a newer radio, that's a possibility. But in a lot of cases, they'd just like to use the one they've got, and we've actually got a reduced level at $70 a year for the people who don't want to make phone calls, who don't want to send GPS positions and so on. Now, those people, though, can still make emergency calls, which I haven't even talked about yet.
No, we should probably get onto that because the safety is a big part in Austravel.
Well, look, I think the key reason to put a HF radio on your vehicle, the underlying reason is really if I get stuck and I need some help, I have a way of communicating. Now, for most people, that's not even going to happen in their lifetime, but it's always a possibility. It's like an insurance policy. You've kind of got to have it and you hope you never need it, sort of thing. So the concept of the emergency call, I mentioned the radios have a calling system built into them. The radios can send a single number on air. It goes out as a broadcast. The multiple bases around Australia will hear it at different distances for the channels that it sends on. Again, not wanting to get too technical into it. But the bottom line is that usually an emergency call is heard by up to 3 bases. The emergency system that we run is those bases automatically send an SMS to 12 responders. A responder is just a person who's trained to use the base equipment by phone, by remote. And they dial back into the base. Their SMS gives them all the information about the person, the number that made the call, the base, the channel, and so on. They dial back into the base and literally start a voice conversation with the emergency caller. And my first statement would be, "Hi Geoff, what's the nature of your emergency?" And we're talking on the radio, even though I might be here in Western Australia, talking through the base in Victoria, talking to you up in the Alps in Victoria, for example.
And so, obviously, there's this fantastic network, and there's a number of base stations here in Western Australia. So you've basically got that ability of having at least 2 or 3 stations, as you mentioned, that you can actually bounce off. So there's no problem of not being able to get a signal.
No, and we probably should talk about the aspect of the 6 bases in Australia. And those 6 bases spread around provide overlapping coverage, meaning that each base has a usable range of like 1,000, 1,500 kilometres.
Yep.
Many cases they go further than that. There's no problem sometimes talking right across Australia on HF. But as a reliable type contact, we can say 1,500 kilometres to each of the bases.
Yeah.
Now that's derived by having a range of frequencies in the radio. And for those that are a little bit radio savvy, different frequencies travel different distances at different times of day. And but that's not very hard to get your head around when you're playing with the radio.
No, I guess it's a bit of trial and error to begin with, and obviously just understanding those frequencies and what you can get out of it.
Yep.
And one of the amazing things is, we were chatting about this too, is there's that stigma that obviously people who use HF are obviously very passionate about radios. You know, there's the ham radio operators and all the rest, but Austravel, many of the members come from all different walks of life, don't they?
Exactly. I mean, it's not uncommon to sit around the campfire at night at my bush camp.
Yep.
We have gatherings,
Yep.
and everybody might be rugged up sitting by the fire, but you'll be chatting, and someone will be a lawyer, and someone will be a doctor, and someone will, be unemployed, and some, like someone will be a truck driver, and we've got a few tow truck drivers as well, and it's like, but when everybody's sitting around in that social environment, could be talking a bit about radio, or other things, but it's quite interesting how there's no separation in level of people. Once you get to that camp sort of situation, everybody's the same.
I think that's really nice. I think it really sort of underlines that we all have that same need, you know, to be connected and to obviously have a way of getting out of a difficult situation, which obviously the network provides.
Well, it does, and I think that's another aspect of HF radio that's not considered, is that there's a community component about it. So you mentioned about people needing to be social, but many times you might be out prospecting for 3, 4, 5 weeks by yourself, or maybe just 2 of you at a time. And just to be able to make contact in the mornings and afternoons to a scared operator, which is just a voice contact. G'day, how you going? We're all good. You know, you don't have to say anything in particular. There's that touching base with somebody, so you kind of know you're not alone to start with. And then the other aspect is that if you develop friends through the campfire type sessions, and I hear you on, and they go, oh, there's Geoff calling in. How you going, Geoff? What are you up to? You know, so you've then got that community having a chat over the fence type concept there as well. Yet you still might be 500 kilometres away from each other.
That's right. And I'm sure when you come into particular camps and they see the HF radio on the back of your car, caravan, or whatever it may be, you've got an instant icebreaker, basically, don't you?
You have. And funny, I was out. Do we digress? I'll tell you a little story.
Oh, look, that's what these interviews and chats are all about. Okay. So go ahead.
I was out the back of Alice Springs and heading out towards Ayers Rock, and you go to mobile phone range pretty quick.
Yeah.
And there was a number of younger campers out there.
Oh, yeah.
And they had, for the first time, realised mobile phone doesn't work. And one of the couples came over and said, with that big antenna on your car, can you still talk to people from here?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I can make phone calls, and I can press one button and make an emergency call. And they were like dumbfounded about that to start with.
Yeah.
But so it was their first experience at their phone not working, their first experience at feeling the isolation of being in a remote area camp and not having any means of communications. And their natural thing was to gravitate to, I've got the biggest antenna in the car park, so they came over and had a chat, and maybe at least they went away knowing that, well, I could make contact if need be for that particular camp. But it opened their awareness to the concept.
That's right, and I guess many people aren't exposed to that isolation, so therefore HF just, all they hear is the radio, and that's it.
Well, the word radio is another topic.
It is, and we might have to leave that for another interview, Kim. But I think more importantly to tell the viewers is, how can they find out about Austravel Safety Net?
Well, to Austravel, as spelled with AUS, Austravel Safety Net, one big word, .org, which is the hard bit, .au is the web page. So,
well, what we'll do to make it easier for the audience is a web link should pop up at the top of your screen, so you can click on that and find out more about it. Now, if that's not your cup of tea, you can delve into the content section down below and click on the web link there. And can they follow on Facebook too, Kim?
Yes, there is an Austravel Facebook page, and the easiest way to get to that is to actually go to the web page first and just click. There's a Facebook link straight off the web page.
Oh, brilliant.
And that'll take them straight through to that.
And if they want to contact anyone in regards to finding out more about the
there's a contacts tab. Again, I go back to the web page, and I know that's not everybody's cup of tea these days.
But as long as they can find it.
But there's the contacts there, and you can either talk to our membership officer or myself. I'm on there as well. And they're welcome to give me a call and have a chat if they want to.
Great. Well, look, thanks for your time, Kim. And I know I've learnt a heck of a lot, and I'm sure the viewers have too. So thanks once again.
Thank you very much.
That's all right.
And nice fire, by the way.
It is, isn't it? We didn't get any smoke in our eyes.
No.
And not too hot, not too cold.
And we don't have the local fire brigade coming up to give us grief as well.
That's always a plus too. Anyway, we might get a bit of a top up here, but look, thanks again for watching. And look, if you are enjoying the content here at Seriously Series, then please do consider supporting us via Patreon. And if Patreon isn't your cup of tea, then you can support us via PayPal. If you're new to the channel, then consider clicking on the subscribe button down below and the notification button too. And I hope to see you in our next video.